Thank you all so much for coming and welcome. I'm Mary Miller, Director of the Getty Research Institute, commonly known as the GRI. You, our audience and interlocutors today, are in many locations. You may be on other continents, other countries, and so you are far from Southern California, where most of us who are employed by the Getty, most of us who are scholars at the Getty, curators, scholars, administrators, stand today on traditional, ancestral, unceded Tongva territory. We start this program with all of you by acknowledging their traditional homeland here, where I stand. In 2018, the Getty Research Institute, the GRI, launched the Getty African American Art History Initiative, committed to expanding and underpinning the narratives of the visual narrative of Black visual culture, both in history and in the present. We've been advised by leading scholars in the field as we have built the program, developing the library and archival resources, among other aspects of our fundamental collections. We're committed to developing program as we go forward, and we know that this is very much a work in progress. Today, we launched the first event of the film series that will build on the initiative. I'll turn this program over to our first African American Art History Initiative postdoctoral fellow, Kristin Juarez, in just a few moments. Kristin earned her PhD in 2019 from Georgia State's Moving Image Studies program. Before she came to Getty, she was the curatorial fellow at Dance Space, executing the Reggie Wilson curated platform 2018, Dancing, Platform, Praying Grounds, Blackness, Churches, and Downtown Dance in Manhattan. This inaugural program today presents multidisciplinary artists Okwui Okpokwasili and devynn Emory in conversation with Kristin. And I thank her for her imaginative curation on this project. Kristin?
Thank you, Mary. And I also welcome Okwui and devynn to join me as well. I also want to thank Chelsea Anderson and Paul Peters for helping facilitate this program. And thank you all for joining us during this lunchtime conversation. Lunch at the Getty has always been a place for people working throughout the Research Institute and the Getty to join together and exchange ideas, conversation, and think about ways we can work together. So it's in this spirit that I'm delighted to invite devynn Emory and Okwui Okpokwasili in conversation to share their practices today. Okwui Okpokwasili is known for multidisciplinary performance pieces that seek to shape and amplify the shared psychic space the audience and performer inhabit, and through centering the African and African American feminine to illuminate universal human conditions. devynn Emory is a choreographer, dance artist, body worker, ceremonial guide, acute care and hospice nurse, currently working as a COVID-19 nurse. Emory's performance work draws from their multiple in-between states of being, both as a mixed race, indigenous, and transgender person, and in holding space for liminal bodies, bridging multiple planes of transition. As Mary mentioned, I'm the research specialist for the African American Art History Initiative, and my research focuses on the intersections of dance, film, and art history. And this conversation today is, in devynn's words, a kindling of a conversation that began with Okwui Okpokwasili's utterances from the chorus, an exhibition co-curated with Judy Hussey Taylor at Dance Space Project. Within this exhibition, Okwui collaborated with devynn and others to sustain shared intimacy and kinship through collective movement and voice practices. While the exhibition was ended as part of the public health response to COVID-19, their work has continued to resonate within this moment for me, particularly has sustained a kind of energy and practice that I hold very dear. I wanted to make Okwi's film Bronx Gothic available before this conversation as a way to ground our conversation on dance films. Using letters as a point of departure, the performance depicts the imaginative intimacy between two brown girls coming of age, remembering and magnifying the traces that we may leave behind. Using the documentary format, the film Bronx Gothic weaves together a portrait of the artist, the performance, and the intimate exchanges between herself and the audience. The film asks viewers to consider how we watch film and how we feel dance when brown women are at their centers. Dancers on Film is a program that will explore how dancers document their movement and how they transform our understanding of the moving image. Both Devynn and Okwui have recently created dance films that we'll be watching today. We'll be watching Okwi's Alto Stratus, an allegory, and an excerpt from Devynn's forthcoming film, Deadbird. The total running time will be about 15 minutes before we begin our conversation. If you have questions, please insert them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll weave them into the conversation. I'll turn it over now to Okwui and to Devynn to introduce their work.
Devynn?
You'd like me to go first?
Yes. Or
Okay.
whose film goes first? I'm so sorry.
We'll be watching Okwui and then Devynn.
Okay, so sorry. Maybe I should go first. So Alto Stratus and Allegory was commissioned by the Onassis Foundation USA during COVID, and it was asking artists to sort of respond to the moment within a framework of 120 hours. And so what you'll be seeing today was my response to the prompt.
Thank you, Okwui. I was just at the precipice of premiering a 3-year development group performance about death and dying, a dance-based project in April when COVID and the multiple pandemics hit. And I was grieving the loss of the performance while simultaneously being thrust into the frontline work of being a COVID-19 nurse. So this project, the project and clip is Deadbird, and it is a grief space for my body as a healthcare worker, a healer, and a mover. And I reimagined this piece into a solo dance film because I really needed the project in order to sustain my life. And that was the safest way at the moment to continue that process.
I want to start with a question directed towards Devynn. One of the things I notice with both of your work actually is this kind of threading the needle between humor and meditative states. Right? We move kind of back and forth in this kind of unsteady play. And in our email exchange, Devynn, one of the things you said to me about Deadbird was that it felt like it was a walk on the margins. And I'm going to quote you, within myself, within planes of existence, and within how to make a performance work today. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks for that great question, Kristin. Yeah, so this work centering medical mannequins began in the beginning of my nursing school training. As a transgender person and a mixed race person, I found that learning on these bodies that were kind of in in-between states themselves, very animated, they were breathing, they had a pulse, we would have to like deliver a robot baby who was screaming. It was like this very strange in-between space that I felt very electric and drawn to and in relation to, kind of in like an object-abject relationship. And they became kind of a balm for me during the pretty rigorous process of becoming a nurse. As someone who's been in ceremonial work and body work for about 20 years, the Western institution was quite jarring. And there was, we had medical simulations in where someone who was hidden was kind of creating the voice for the mannequin. And there's these like many layers of performance for me that were some of the best performances I think I've ever been a part of. And sometimes I think I went to nursing school just to meet these mannequins, and they are now the essence of a lot of my work.
Thank you. Okwui, I wonder if any, if you wanted to respond to this.
It's so incredible. Yeah, because it's so incredibly creepy. Well, I'm just thinking about the devynn work, right? And it is that beautiful, what is that? The uncanny valley, right?
Yes.
We know that it's not a real person at all. But then there is the kind of this emotional connection I have, especially to him. Like he came and then he left, right? He was there and he left for 13 years and now he's back. Maybe he will leave again, maybe he won't. And then you have that image of him moving towards us, right? Which is also hopeful, but there's such a valence that you give to it. And I feel like I'm in that liminal space as I watch. So I'm not actually asking a question. I'm just saying it both creeps me out and kind of excites me.
Yes.
Mary asks, how is it my own body shivers when I see these two films? I think one thing that stands out to me is how in Devynn's work, both you and the mannequin can move in different ways and unexpectedly. So we think we know what this mannequin is, their experience, and then now they're moving, and now they're on this sterile table. And Devynn, you go from kind of talk show host to this to nurse and scrubs to kind of practitioner, and all of these different registers of movement kind of keep kind of unending, unnerving my viewing experience. And I think, Okwui, there's a moment when your image, when you go from performing and you're kind of both tethered and in the clouds, and there's this tug of whether or not you're grounded or if you're in flight.
Yeah, I do feel like, yes, Kristin, like I feel like there's this sense also of like being in the body, but then wanting to leave it. And perhaps in mine, because it was made kind of in the height of, like right around George Floyd and, then COVID protests around wearing masks or people having the freedom to kill other people, apparently. I felt like this desire for a dispersal, right? And I think even in the utterances from the chorus, the platforms that Devynn and I shared, there was this idea of what is it to be like, to have a kind of bodily integrity, but still a porosity, right? An ability to reach out and be in some way tethered to each other, but not in a way that is limiting, right? So yes, so this attempt at flight, all of the things that are happening in the body, things that might be happening on the body, and can my body do the work of getting ready to fly, right? And disperse and join something else, right? And then of course, the altostratus clouds do signal, when you see these clouds, it signals that a storm or some rain or snow is going to come, right? So it is there is a sense of, okay, can we also kind of be tethered together, get ready to enter into a bigger body, and come and let the storm come, right? So that we do what we need to do. So, yeah, but it does feel like these two pieces are really thinking about, yes, like not excessive, but exceeding, is it possible to think about going beyond this body?
Yeah, I see both of them as edge walking, and I feel like I felt this a little bit about Sitting on a Man's Head, your latest work, also.
Or
Um,
practice,
or practice, absolutely. Which
right?
I think of Dead Bird as a vessel and a practice and an invitation for us all to kind of think about death work in a way that I feel like the film that we just saw also is a little bit of this invitation. Uh, Someone once said to me, like, "Oh, Devyn, you repeat movement a lot. Is that because you're scared of death?" And then I realized in
Hmm.
watching your film, I'm like, "Oh, Okwi's repeating a lot too." And I like the challenge of the question, because for me, I too feel like
Hmm.
I tend to get into like ecstatic states of repetition that are both bringing me into the vitality of life in the moment and a practice of death before we arrive there, because that moment can no longer occur again.
Hmm.
And I really felt that watching your film, of this kind of like calling in and pushing out, this kind of like exhumed state and glory, this kind of ecstatic practicing of death. I don't know if that relates.
No, but the idea that why do you, does repetition, is repetition or your practice of repetition an attempt to, you know, elude death, or because you're afraid of death, is so interesting to me, because I feel like, I think that it's when we're not repeating that we're afraid, right?
Mm, hmm.
Like, what is it to try to stay in one, because especially we live in such, it's just everything is rapid. Like, even in this COVID time, everyone is rapidly adapting, right, to how to function, how to transform practices to this space. um and I'm always thinking about what is it to not move so quickly ahead, like, what is it to be here, be in the storm of now, right, and
Mm,
feel this, like, not miss anything right now, instead of, looking, always being way far ahead, or imagining. I mean, we have to do that all of the time in our lives, and that repetition as practice, um I just feel like it's an opening, because really repetition is kind of impossible.
yes, exactly this.
So actually, so I feel like that practice of repetition and trying and trying and trying to stay in one place is like, I don't know, it might welcome death. It suggests not a fear of death. It
Hmm.
suggests that, to me, like, it suggests it's like we're going to, whatever, I don't know, I guess it's sort of like it's going to come, whatever, I'm going to open up and allow something to come. I'm not running away from anything. I'm going to be here in this impossible place. And imagining death is kind of an impossible place to inhabit in the imagination, right? And so I feel like
Absolutely.
that attempt at repetition is an impossible place, and not a repetition in terms of, okay, I'm going to fulfill this, um, with an eye to kind of a beatific kind of presence, right? But I'm going to repeat not only the form but the energy, and I'm going to try to continue the, like, an energetic repetition, right? And so maybe the form will start to disintegrate, things will start to disintegrate, but there's somehow like this core fire that you're like tapping into, which I don't know. Why am I don't know, maybe that's not making much sense about how is that not a fear of death?
Hmm.
I think it's not, but I'm having a hard time. Yeah, help me.
I know I toggle between the two, but I think I mean, even in watching your film and hearing you like groan, and it eludes both pain and then a slight second later ecstasyism, and then exorcism, and then they're just like flipping in a way that I feel like, Kristin, you were mentioning, like, I'm a nurse, and then I'm a light worker, and then I'm a um, yeah, how can we be all the bodies? I really relate to that right here in this moment. And it is a simultaneous practice of death. For me, repetition is this. I'm not, thank
Right,
goodness we get to practice. So
right,
we don't avoid the crisis of it later, which is, I think, a
that's
lot
right.
of what my work is aiming toward.
Or if life, if actually living is in some way, like, we're always very, the proximity to death is very close, like, right, why, there isn't some sort of fine gap between this living moment and the possibility of our death in the next moment, right?
Yes.
So it's like, it's how do we also think in these ways that are not singular binary, but just recognize all of these things are occurring at once. And so in the repetition, it is trying to be in that space to sort of awaken to all of these things that are occurring at once. Instead of running to the next thing, you realize, oh, the next thing is already here, and the past thing is here. So that's what it is. Yes, thank you, Devin. Yes.
It's a kind of preparation in a way that we're just constantly have to kind of live in a state to be ready. And how do you slow that down so that we can do it in a way that honors where we are and who we're with? I wonder, one thing that really strikes me also is your use of language. Both of you have a deep writing practice in Bronx Gothic. That performance was centered around letters, and then devynn and MMM, your work was also is reflecting a writing practice as well. I wonder how that informs how you make performance work and how then you think about it and translating it into film.
Devin, you start, because
Sure.
I was talking so much before.
MMM is it started as a somatic practice for myself to release each patient who has passed away under my care with my physical hands. And it was just a private practice for me to kind of untether the body, as I'm a person who really is connected to the spirit world, to kind of usher them along into another plane in a way that the hospital setting doesn't always allow. So to both honor them and their trajectory and to kind of release them from my body. And then I developed a writing practice, which I call embodied eulogies, for each patient who passes, just as a way to kind of like pull the essences of things I really saw in them that I wanted to honor, and lessons that I've gleaned and conversations that we've had. As a eulogy to really be grateful and gratitude, because it's really like a duet that we were in and are in. Things have changed quite a bit since COVID now that I'm seeing a mass amount of death. And I haven't yet figured out how to keep up with the somatic and writing practice, as it's quite rapid.
And, for me, I think that I just always, when I was younger, just thought there was something about writing that, for me, I felt like shaping a kind of social body. Dancing, I grew up around people dancing. It was very much a deep part of my parents' social lives, the lives of Nigerian and Igbo people. Dancing was everywhere. But I felt that when I was younger, writing was a space that would allow me, also was very private, right? So it allowed me to sort of just imagine otherwise. And so as I've gotten older and continued that practice, I do feel that I like the word, right? I like I like the texture of it. I like what it might do in the body. I like how the word itself is a movement, right? Right, isn't choreography, right? That's a kind of writing in space. And so I especially love the possibilities, the dynamic possibilities when you think about how a word or trying to find a word, how it rings in you. And at a certain point when you cannot find it, how is the word just redounding in the body? And so I take certain movement and choreographic phrases from kind of the impact of the word, or from what the word cannot handle, right? And so it's so I just feel like it opens up, it continues to open up an imaginative, right? An imaginative space, a kind of I mean, even though I love watching people move, and I think in my practice, I often set up prompts where people are thinking about language in some way, but they don't have to speak, right? But I do think, you know, words are so, and maybe it's a problem, right? That they're the first thing. You know, you can see somebody, you know, doing something, but the minute they start speaking, it puts everything else into question, right? So that power, I want to, my daughter just came back. I don't know if anyone can hear, maybe no one can. Okay, well, there we go. So I'm so sorry. So anyway, she's okay. Devyn actually knows her. So I just love that dynamic, those dynamic possibilities.
I also,
go ahead, please.
I like, you know, I remember talking with you, Kristin, about my usage of film, or I look toward film to be able to understand my choreography. And I feel like, I'll speak to the film part first, that film is a way of like allowing a viewer on their own time to kind of lean in and fall in love with the character. And that is enhanced, of course, by lighting and editing and the way that live performance, although we dancers and choreographers love the ephemera, like it just gets elevated and held. And I think writing for me, I've brought it in the last few years in my work because storytelling and elders are becoming such a bigger part of my practice. And especially since my work is around death, inviting people to tell their story, which then kind of expands us out of the performance world into the medical world, into Indigenous elders, into just like a wider conversation where more people can be in the room. So I like writing and exchange for that reason. Yeah, so Dead Bird is like a montage, collage, if you will, of conversations I've had with a lot of people past, and that feels so important to have their voice in there.
Mm-hmm. One thing that, in terms of like trying to like monitor my emotional response to that excerpt, is also seeing the kinds of formal cues that it sets up. So the kind of like talk show format, the way that we hear an audience come in and it doesn't match, and then what I'm feeling, and then I have to shift it. Like I'm like, oh, this is like, oh, I am having fun. And the way that that kind of moving image vocabulary also kind of shapes a viewing experience, seems to also kind of pull at this kind of unsteadiness that we're practicing as audience members. And I can really appreciate how working with film kind of gives another layer to that kind of intuition, right? It causes us to really kind of think about what we know and how we feel based on what we see. And Okwui, I feel like that in some ways the works speak so much in conversation with each other, because it does seem like this is a kind of practice that you're also thinking about in terms of, you know, how we feel and relate as audience members to you and to your body. One, I do want to read a question that's come in, and it is relating to Bronx Gothic. Someone asked, how are you able to come from a trance-like state to be grounded enough to sing and speak within the performance?
Okay, yeah, I'm not in a trance. That's one thing, right? However, it's not a trance. But it is like, there is a particular psychic work that you have to do to prepare. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but with rehearsals and shaping it and mapping it out, I prepare. And there is it's like, it's almost as if inside I prepare a kind of a kind of world, a psychic world that I inhabit, and that is, it's bendy and flexible, but it doesn't break. So that's just, so I just have to prepare to, so I wouldn't call it a trance, because because I see everybody, I see whoever is there, I see, but it's like, but I'm seeing from the particular kind of container I've made for myself within, to do that. Does that make sense? Because I think there are like trance, I mean, when I think of trance too, I think of people who are ridden, in like, maybe voodoo or voodoo, when, the different orishas, they come and they ride you, right? And people, they don't know what they're doing, or people who have never had anything to drink, I don't know, they're legba and they're having rum, or I don't know if it's a legba and rum, but you know what I mean? And they're doing things that they would not have done. And I would say that I am preparing my body maybe so that I can ride it. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a trance. Because but it's true that I want to open up a possible, sometimes there are certain performances that I do where I'm hoping that maybe I can open up a portal to some part of a past that sort of is inside of me, inside of the people that I'm working with. Yeah, I don't know what to call it though.
In terms of your preparation, kind of formally, I know you work a lot with your partner, Peter Bourne. I've seen some sketches that you've done. I want to ask you a little bit about how you prepare for live performance versus, I don't know if it's in a versus, but or in relation, how is that in relationship to preparing for this film, Alto Stratus?
I mean, with live performance, I think the preparation is really, I just have to do all sorts of things for my body to get ready too, like just on a physical level, like, okay, you have to drink a certain amount and then stop drinking so you don't have to pee, right? Because Bronx Gothic happens for an hour and a half, or I'm doing what I call the quake for half an hour, and then the speaking starts, and goes for an hour. So I have to drink a certain amount and stop drinking like 2 hours before the performance. Stop eating about 2 hours before the performance, right? And then afterwards, it's like winding down, preparing, icing, clean, you know what I mean? Just taking care of things before the performance, warming up, also running through the entire text. Do you know what I mean? Like, and just, whether it's music or just it's just getting ready to get into that container again. So that it's basically as porous as it is, it doesn't break. But with film, well, especially with Alto Stratus, I think that I feel like even though I was not on the front lines, like devynn, and I had actual space and time, there was a tightness, an anguish, an anger, a rage, and so many of us have been living with this a sense of existential dread, and living through it in so many ways, and then for it to sort of seem to spread and take over everything was also like wild. It was like, wow, is everybody now a Black person? It's not true, but that sense of, I don't know, that sense of our own precarity, a lack of care, a lack of concern that you're moving through the world that is indifferent to your death and your pain. So many of us have, so it felt so, it was so intense. So it was like for the film, it's almost as if I just had to just keep tapping into that space and use that space and think about a vocabulary for that space as I started to think. I mean, and maybe that's why the language had a kind of lightness to it, even though it is in the end like, let's fucking take it all down. Let's start this shit again, right? But it's still, I was listening to my daughter as she was writing poetry in school and doing different verse strategies, and I started to think that might help me. I'm gonna just write this long, like rhyming crazy poem, and it's gonna have everything that I want to have. And then I've been looking at birds. I mean, Brooklyn has an incredible population of birds, and then I had been going up to the roof every now and then, because it's like, where can you go where you might take off a mask? I was going out onto the fire escape. I was thinking about what it is to be in New York on a roof, helicopters going overhead, because we know that they're surveilling people. So it's just like, how do I just actually capture this sort of larger, also sonic moment, like, and capture the space that I'm in within it, right? So in some way, you feel more protected with the film, right? Like, because I think in live performance, you have to kind of make this interior space that you enter into, because you're going to be with other people and you have to protect that space that you're operating from. But with film, it's like it's again a closed, and you're protected and you're really raw, and you just, yeah, it actually felt. And then the sky and the clouds, I mean, I felt like my partner and I are really invested in how to shape also the architectural space of the room, but then to recognize sort of the gift of the architecture of the world, that space.
Thank you.
Good, yeah.
Devynn, I wonder if you could speak for a moment about that transition between kind of resolving that this wasn't going to be a live performance as you attended it when you intended it to be, and thinking about making a film. And what did you give up? What did you gain in that process?
Yeah, I mean, we were moments away from the premiere, so I had so many, like 20 people who made sound and were dancing and performing music live and story writing, and that was a loss to kind of let go of the collective, as I feel like we have, similar to what you're saying, look, we kind of created a container, and our container was kind of like a grief container for something that we didn't know was about to happen. For me, it was already the dailiness of my patient care and being a hospice nurse, and so when that broke and I wasn't going to rehearsal anymore, I was like, it's a loss for all of us when things just kind of ended in this way, in the live embodiment performance world. But I felt like it's not possible for me to not continue this work, because it's something I need to sustain the dailiness of now what is. And I am so grateful, because I had been practicing for that moment, and it was a way to kind of really help me get through, I mean, not like it's over, but those first few months of longer hours at the hospital, and how grueling it was, my psyche and my systems. And now, Kristin, you have such a wisdom around the moving image and archiving. Like, we've worked together in Utterances of the Chorus, and Okwui, I keep hearing you talk about creating a container, whether it's like external or internal landscape. And I think what we're talking about and what I'm really relating to you both on is something that's different than live performance, than what we're doing now is making these kind of films, is that and seeing them back to back really struck me in this way too. Black and brown bodies being captured, that's not the word I want to use. Black and brown bodies being seen and then also archived in a more permanent way as we're seeing the masses of death continue, has been a really empowering process. And I'm grateful to learn more about archiving from you. And I think that's just going to be, I just feel like stepping into that as a bigger part of my process is really important. And I didn't understand the importance until I made this film.
Thank you. There's one last question that maybe kind of shifts us into another lane, but I do want to acknowledge someone did ask if you could speak a little bit about particular artists who have influenced your work. I just thought we would spend a few moments talking about your influences and inspiration, and look forward to speaking again.
Yeah, I would say Ralph Lemon is somebody that I love, and obviously I've worked with him, so I feel like he has a generous practice, the practice of time. He gives things time. He's not looking for an answer, but he's very excited about the questions that may arise. I spent some time in Japan studying at the Body Weather Farm with Min Tanaka, and then doing some practices with the late Yoshida Ono, the son of the late Kazuo Ono, and thinking and working on images and imagery within the body, right? And then of course, you know, the writing of Ntozake Shange, looking at Anna Devere Smith's work, just, you know, yeah, there are so many that I can't. I mean, Toni Morrison, Saidiya Hartman, like there are so many people that are sort of, yeah, present.
Lately, I've been really inspired by the work that I've been doing with S.J. Norman and Joseph Pierce in the annual programming of Knowledge of Wounds, which is an Indigenous-led platform, to create more space for Indigenous-led practices and ceremony. And Okwui, your work has always been such a big inspiration to me. You joined me in fire ceremony there, actually, and that was a really powerful moment. And really, my ancestors right now, I feel like I've kind of, in order to sustain this practice and this nursing work, I feel like I've kind of centered in and been calling from above, and that has been my main source of continuation and inspiration right now.
Yeah, I just have to sort of piggyback. I did the fire breathing practice with devynn back in, was it January or maybe the fall or something, and it was incredible because I do think there's something about a sonic practice that both connects us to the ancestors, to each other, again, like a kind of essential porosity, like, you know, your fire practice asking us to sort of listen to the silence, like silence as a sonic space. How do we support each other, move around each other? Do you know what I mean? There's something like that sonic practice speaks to about like our kind of the practice of community, being in common and being with each other. So, I mean, your practice, that was amazing because it reaffirms also, like, it reaffirmed something in me, felt like, oh, you're going in the right direction, Okwui. Like, so it was like, I felt total gratitude for that. This idea, Samita Sinha's practices with vocal, like just, you know, like also again, not thinking about the end result, the product, right? But thinking about a kind of energetic capacity within and how to project that. I don't know.
Yeah, Samita does a great job at kind of, like you said, not preparing and responding from something in the past or the future, but just really listening. And the fire practice does this too, right? Listening to your own vessel, the body next to you, what's outside of your space, what's outside of that ring, like tree rings, to kind of really get connected and then bring that energy back. So it's a reciprocal process and reciprocal gratitude, really.
And it's also so infuriating to me because I do feel like we're in this, like, we're lost in some argument around my freedom, versus sort of your freedom, when in fact, like, to listen, have the capacity to let someone enter is an incredibly freeing space.
Mm.
And to build that capacity to listen and to move through that listening is like so expansive. Like, it's not something that delimits my capacity to get somewhere. It's actually opening up channels that I may never have gone to. It's just like, it's anyway. So yeah, I have an apple.
Well, I'm really grateful for you all to take a moment to think about how our lineages and inspirations, both formally, personally, spiritually, can be in conversation, how we can think about lineages in that way, aesthetic lineages in that way as well. Thank you once again. If you have any unanswered questions, you can write to, I believe, GRI events at Getty.edu. Chelsea, please, I look forward to clarifying that as well. Yes, I've been confirmed, that's correct. And we will be sure to answer your questions. Thank you, Devynn. Thank you, Okwui, for such an incredible sharing of your work and your time and where you're at in this moment. It has really been a joy.
Thank you so much, Kristin and Devynn. I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you all and be in conversation with you, Devynn.
You too, Okwui, and thank you, Kristin, for gathering us. These kinds of conversations give me so much life.
And I look forward to chatting with you some more about archival practices and what we also hold in our archives. We do have some images of Mintanaka Okwui that you may be interested in. We can, Devynn, also, of course, talk about archiving. Again, if you do have additional questions, it's GRI events at Getty.edu. Thank you and have a great afternoon, everyone.